Hello everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be looking at the tier list for 12-16. So as always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out a ton on the channel. If you'd like to see me live, we stream every night starting around 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, usually going until about 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's a very friendly, chill community. We'd love to have you. So come by, check it out, and let's go ahead and get in here. So I am sorry I didn't end up doing one last patch. It just didn't happen. But I'm going to do more this patch. I'm going to do this one, of course. God, my hair is doing some yard work, and I probably should have taken a shower first. But anyway, so sorry about that, but I am going to do the support tier list. I'll probably be able to do the ADC tier list tomorrow, and we'll see if we can do some of the other roles as well. I'm also back to doing Total War Warhammer content, if you're interested in that at all. I've got several campaigns that I'm going to be doing on that. And I'm going to be doing some Wrath of the Lich King as well. I don't expect a lot of people to be interested in watching that, but there will be some of that. It'll be social if you just want to come on and talk about League or whatever. I might stream some of that as well, although it just kind of depends on the hours. But anyways, let's go ahead and get in here. So the patch notes themselves, I don't think are going to change that much. I'm not going to make a separate video just because it would probably only be like 5 or 10 minutes anyways. So I'm just going to go through it really quick and just talk about how it pertains to support or maybe some of the other roles. But at the start of each of my tier list videos, I'll just mention anything that I think from the patch that might help. Or hurt different champions. So Udyr, I don't think it's going to shake up the meta too much. We'll have to see. I haven't watched a lot of footage of him, but I think of him as sort of like Volibear, Wukong. You know, whether he's better than worse than those, I don't know. But it's like the same type of champion, right? So I don't think it's going to dramatically shift up the way the jungle meta is working. It's still just a bunch of bruisers that build, Death's Dance type of items and run around. So I don't think it's going to change any jungle synergies as far as the tier list goes. Caitlyn's going to get a little bit stronger. Crit, this is going to make her better. I guess really at like 2 or 3 items, so in the mid game, so it's probably not going to affect laning too much with our the headshot passive is getting a little bit more per level, so she's better late game. She's better probably starting around 3 items. It'll be pretty noticeable. So it's not going to affect the laning, and her ability to poke. So like the Xeraths, the Vel'Kozes, Luxes, stuff like that aren't going to benefit too much from this. But it might help things that increase her attack speed later on. So stuff like Lulu, stuff like Yuumi, things like that. Janna, that gives her the extra AD. That type of stuff is going to be a little bit stronger with her in the mid to late game. Again, probably not going to shake up the meta. I don't think she's going to all of a sudden be super dominant. But it does help her a little bit. Diana getting nerfed a bit later on. I don't think it's going to change the meta because there aren't specific supports that are great with her that wouldn't also be good with other champions in the meta. So I'm glad they're nerfing her. She's overall strong, but shouldn't affect support. Draven, a little bit less damage early on. So this is going to hurt all ends. It's going to make Enchanters a little bit better. It's going to make Sivir and Zeri a little bit better because he's considered one of the major counters to those champs by putting on a pressure early. So this is going to make things like Nautilus, Leona, stuff like that just a little bit weaker because this is one of their best combinations early on for kill lanes. So does it mean he's going to be completely out of the meta and that Nautilus and Leona can't be played anymore? No, but it's just going to hurt that style, and it's going to help the dominant style with the Enchanter hyperscalers a little bit more, which is, I don't agree with that. I think they need to nerf Sivir. I think they need to nerf Moonstone, but they're not doing it. It is what it is. Okay, Irelia, a little bit stronger. It's not going to affect support that much. Probably, honestly, won't affect Irelia players that much either. Jace. Now, this is quite a bit stronger later on, right? Like 25 extra damage. This is what you max first. So that's going to help with lane dominance. You're not going to be paired with Jace's, probably, very much in the bot lane. So it shouldn't affect the laning too much. And he doesn't require a special support. But anything that can snowball off of his dominance or poke type of champions later might be better. Now this is only hammer form. This is not his poke from his laser. This is only when he goes into melee. So it's primarily just going to be for laning. Probably won't affect support too much. Later in the game, maybe gives a slight edge if you put him in a poke comp with something like a Xerath or something like a Lux, but I don't think it's going to move the needle too much. Okay, Kai'Sa. A little bit of extra damage on hit. A little bit of AP Kai'Sa. Stronger scaling on the Q, stronger scaling on the R. Is AP Kaisa going to be back? I don't know. They nerfed the W a lot. I don't remember how much they nerfed it. I don't know why they're trying to make AP Kaisa a thing. But I don't think she's going to be amazing in solo queue. But if she is good, then she's going to be better with dive champions that can give her more attack speed. So something like a Lulu, where she can jump in. Kaisa can aggressively jump in. Lulu can pop her up. Polymorph somebody, put the extra, pix damage on her. So Lulu would be potentially a good combo for that type of comp. Rakan, any kind of dive buddy might be good. But I don't think it's going to be strong enough to move the needle significantly on her or any specific supports. Malphite, a little bit lower on the shield. I don't think support Malphite is completely horrible in some matchups that are really immobile. So against something like a Jinx or Misfortune, or Enchanters, if you think you can get the kill on them early, maybe he's okay. But in general, I don't think it's going to be that great. I don't think it's going to matter too much. Poppy, this is like Jungle Poppy getting nerfed on her clear. Probably won't affect support. I mean, if she gets nerfed out of the meta... Okay, go ahead. I don't know if it's going to affect her that much, but if it does make her less popular in the meta, that's obviously going to be a huge win for mobile supports like Rakan, primarily. So I would love to see nobody play Poppy as a Rakan player. And anything else that likes a dash, which is a lot of champions in the game. So it's a slight buff for, Zeres, Lucians, things of that nature that have dashes. Okay, Tristana getting quite a bit more attack speed. I mean, 15% extra attack speed definitely does matter. Tristana is a good all-in champion, so if you pair her with a Leona, with a Nautilus, that type of thing, that's going to help. So this is good to try to get on there and punish some of those scaling ADCs early. So I think Tristana is pretty underrated. I think she's better than people might believe in Platinum and lower. Yuumi, well, at least they're nerfing Yuumi. I think they just need to nerf Moonstone again. But just, I think they just, we were talking about this on stream the other day. They just need to redesign the item. Like, just get rid of Moonstone as an item and then make another item the go-to mythic item. Give it all the same stats as something like a Moonstone. But just make it more appropriate and not give as much passive power. So we thought Mikhail's would be an awesome choice. There might be some games where you just feel like you don't need a Mikhail's, but then that's fine. Just get Shirelia's or, get Mandate. Like, there are other options for supports. It's just Moonstone gives way too much just passive healing and forces people to get Grievous Wounds. It's just a very unhealthy item. So they need to change that item. They either need to make something like Mikhail's that's active and has a very specific niche, make that a mythic, or they need to they could make something like Ardent Sensor a mythic if they really want to make something that's still has passive power in it but is not healing, if they want that to be a thing. Or they could just bring back something like Athene's if they want burst healing but not as much sustain healing over the course of a fight. But anyways, at least they're nerfing Yuumi. Okay, so movement speed scaling is down. The base is still the same. And the cooldown is up a little bit later on, so you can't heal as often. I still think she'll be pretty... The thing about Yuumi is she's not going to have a really high win rate, probably. It's going to be about 50%. But the problem is like, her ceiling, as far as like the amount of influence she can output on a game, is just outrageous. Like, late game, if you put her on anybody that's hyper fed, it just pushes them and makes them too powerful. So how do you really fix that? I think they just need to rework Yuumi and don't let her permanently attach. That's what I've said for a very long time. Just, she can attach, once every 5 seconds or something like that. Or she can attach to somebody for like 3 seconds, and then she can't reattach to the same person for 10 seconds or something like that. So force her to keep moving around in fights, or force her to hop off every now and then if it's the laning phase. And in exchange for that, obviously, they would have to rebalance her a little bit, right? They'd have to, I don't know what it would be, give her a little more movement speed, maybe reimagine her Q, lower her mana costs, something like that. But that's just the fact that she can permanently attach later and you can never interact with her, I think is really problematic. So that's what they need to change. Also, because she doesn't ever have to hop off. She inherently gets a free like 950 gold on a champion that already scales really heavily because you don't have to buy boots on her. You don't have to get the Ionian boots. So I think they need to fix that stuff about Yuumi. Just don't let her permanently attach and just re-envision, reimagine the champion. I think it's still cool if she can jump on people to become untargetable every now and then, to like find her safe space and also to empower people at specific moments. And I think that would be a cool choice, right? Are you going to hop on to protect yourself on somebody, or are you going to wait for a very specific moment to hop on when somebody's going in? And then in team fights, still let her attach to other people, but just don't let her reattach to the same person or stay on the same person forever. So that she has to think about getting boots. She has to think about durability a little bit. And people could actually interact with her. So, anyways, will this matter that much? I'm still going to have her in S tier. I think she's just too dangerous if it gets to late game with a lot of the champions that are running around right now. Even though her win rate's not going to reflect it. Ziri, why are they nerfing Ziri but not nerfing Sivir? Like, Ziri is at least relatively high skill cap, especially for solo queue. Like, a lot higher skill cap than Sivir is. Okay. So they're just nerfing the scaling on her Q and her W, especially the AP scaling. That's fine. The AP build is degenerate, but they're nerfing the AD scaling too. She is a problem for pro, but in solo queue, it's bad. Just get rid of the infinite scaling on her ult. Like, why does it take them so long to recognize the problematic aspects of these champions? Like, everybody talks about it all the time. What's the problem with Yuumi? Ask anybody. You can't interact with her. That's the problem, right? What's the problem with Ziri? She gets infinite scaling on her speed. She's too fast with her ult. Okay, so fix that. Just make it, like, just cap it. Just say you get up to whatever the number is, 15% movement speed while you stay in combat. That's still really good. And then that way you don't have to nerf all of her, other aspects of her kit, right? Her trading, her lightning shock, all this other stuff. You don't have to nerf that because you nerf the problematic thing. So it's like either you can let the champion keep the really problematic thing and just nerf them into the dirt with everything else, or you could just nerf the problematic thing, right? So, I don't know. It's like everybody knows this. Everybody knows what the problem is with these two champions. I don't know why it's taken so long to fix it. I mean, I guess they think that's a cornerstone of their identity. Like, they can't get rid of that. They just have to nerf everything else because that's, like, the thing that makes those champions unique. But I disagree. I think they could still feel really unique and interesting without the most obnoxious, overpowered aspects of their kits. Okay, Zoe... Allied champions also drop orbs. That's interesting. I hadn't read that before. I wonder if are they trying to make her a support? That's the only reason why that would matter. I mean, I guess later on if you're just giving your ADC farm mid lane or something. The Sleepy Trouble Bubble, a little bit more damage. I don't know. I've never really thought of her too much as a support for a long time, but that does make it more interesting. I'm not sure if it would actually be good. I feel like she needs items, but I would have to rethink that. That definitely makes this interesting, though. Like, her W can actually do something in lane a little bit more often. I mean, you've got the bubble. Like, you can catch people with that. You've got the Q, obviously, can do a lot of damage. I don't know if it does enough. I'd have to see the base damage on her. Let me just look real quick. Because I'm under the impression that she really needs levels, but which means she needs to be in a solo lane, aka. Next auto attack. After casting an ability to become a non-projectile and do it. Okay, yes. So this does, her passive does way more damage after, per level. So you need levels on that. You really want levels on the Q. Now, it does have a really high number based on percentage traveled. Increased by a lot, so maybe it's still enough. Like, it's overkill. Spell Thieves is doesn't care about levels. Sleepy Trouble Bubble goes down to 12 seconds. They fall asleep for 2 seconds. That's a beast piece of CC, and it also does huge damage too. Consumes the deal buff to do true damage equal to the post mitigation damage dealt. Capped at the Sleepy Trouble Bubbles damage. The bonus damage is dealt before the triggering damage. Okay, so you hit him for 220. And you can do an additional 220. Okay. So that the thing is, too, that doesn't have to be you. That can be anybody that hits them. They just have to hit them hard with something. Just like a normal auto attack is probably not going to do it. Right, so obviously you usually hit them with your Q and kill them that way. But in theory, an ally could get that hit on them. Right, it's like the cooldown is still pretty high, though, if you're thinking like just a support hook type of ability. And then obviously the ultimate is just to... I still feel like she probably just needs items. I don't think it'll be great as a support. Although, I don't know. I mean, you can poke a lot, and that does give you a little bit of wave clear to help your team push. I mean, if you're really good with her, you can probably make it work. But you'd be very vulnerable to ganks, too, in a long lane like that, or to all-ins. I don't think it's probably great, but if you're a great Zoe player, maybe you could make this work. I don't know. Zyra, this is actually pretty nice. That's going to allow you to cast your other spells a quarter of a second faster, so that actually can matter, right? When you're throwing your E and dropping 2 plants, and then like how fast can you cast your ult after that? Half a sec or a quarter of a second matters. That can be the difference on someone flashing before they get knocked up or not. So that definitely can matter quite a bit. Zyra will still be like pretty good. Now this does matter. This even shroud, an extra 1% damage is sort of whatever, but the staying on for another 1 second is 25% longer duration. And you got to remember that this like spreads out and hits multiple targets too. If they're all bunched up, it's like an AoE around the person whenever you CC them. So being able to keep that up for longer could be pretty meaningful. And this is already like a pretty good item, I think. I know it's good on Rakan. I think it's good on other champs in certain situations. And that's basically it. So not that much, right? Like even Shroud's probably the most noteworthy one. And then you've got the Yuumi nerf, the Zyra nerf. Okay, let's get into the tier list. So sorry, that took a little bit longer than I thought, but it was really still like 10 or 15 minutes. And I don't think that's worth its own video. Not on my channel anyways. Okay, well, the tier list is probably not going to be that different than it has been for a while, honestly, in solo queue. I haven't seen a bunch of standouts, but we'll talk about some of the things that may have changed a little bit here. Janna, I've still got to put her at the top just because she's got a 53.5% win rate. Now, I personally do not win on this champ very often. There's not a lot of new technology here, right? It's just still Moonstone, Broken Moonstone, plus Redemption. You do go for Glacial Augment with Janna. For those of you that haven't watched my past tier list or haven't really played Janna very much, the reason that you do that is your Tornado counts as a piece of hard CC when you hit somebody with it. So it's very, very easy to hit that. And then the scaling on Glacial scales like ridiculously well with plus healing and shielding. So the fact that Moonstone, once it ramps up, gives you like 25% extra plus healing and shielding, and then they also changed her E to give you an additional 15% plus healing and shielding when she impairs the movement of somebody. So that 15% there, plus if this is stacked up, it's going to give you another 25, so that's 40%. And this scales at 9% per plus healing and shielding, right? So if you have 4 of that, then that's going to be a 66% slow. It also scales with AP, so it's going to be even higher than that. And that's off of just one item with no runes, right? And then once you get, you know, the additional 16% over here off of Redemption, it's an insanely, like, huge AoE slow on Janna. It fits right in with her sort of just peel and protect playstyle. And then that also gives her access to free boots, biscuits, and cosmic insights. So all of those are very good. And then you still do want to go Font of Life and Redemption. And the main reason you want to go Font is if you do need to get the Grievous Wound item whenever you slow somebody, so you hit them with, you know, any of your stuff, or even the Glacial when it spreads out and slows people, that counts as a slow. That's going to put a debuff on them for Font of Life, and then anyone that attacks that person, it counts as a heal coming from you, and then they're going to get the buff where they apply the Grievous Wounds. And if you also were to get anything like Ardent Censer or Staff of Flowing Water, it would also give them those buffs from Font of Life. So Font is just coded really weirdly, where it's not lifesteal, it's a heal that comes from you. So anything that triggers off of you healing people works with Font of Life. So you want that with it for sure, and then Revitalize is obviously a really strong rune as well. Anytime you're getting a lot of plus healing and shielding. So she peels really well, she protects, she has pretty good scaling with her own plus healing and shielding, just how difficult it is to kill her with Moonstone. She still gives, like, you know, 50 AD when you put this on an AD carry or an assassin. You know, you can put it on your Sivir, you can put it on your Zed, your Talon. I mean, anybody that has AD, and it's going to be useful. Yes, they have nerfed the shield over time, but she still peels incredibly well, and half the time you're putting this shield on your AD carry on the backline anyways, just so that they get the extra attack damage, just so they do more damage. So she's really not all about the shield. Like, it's nice, but she does so much else in her kit as well. With the Tornado, with her ultimate healing people for like 1 billion, that they buffed that recently as well, and just how well she itemizes. Another thing about Janna also is she's really fast, because the passive movement speed she gets on her W, which means you can rotate between lanes really well to go help out your side laners, to just roam up and down the river, but also gives you pretty good vision control, because you're able to go up, get vision. If anyone tries to get on top of you, it's so hard to catch her, because you've got the Tornado they have to get through, you've got the R in an emergency situation, and if things really start getting crazy, you still have your flash. So it's just very, very hard to punish Janna. And that's what makes her good. Now, why don't I play Janna more then, you might ask? Well, the big issue with Janna is she doesn't have very much offense as far as, like, enabling your team to go in and start a fight, whereas other enchanters do, right? Like, Yuumi has her ultimate. Yuumi can speed people up with her E. Sona's got her ult. Lulu has her W to help speed people in. So most other enchanters have ways to speed up allies or otherwise, you know, empower them to go start fights, whereas Janna is all peel and protect. So if you have the higher scaling team and you're trusting your teammates to make the right engages, to you know, just perform well, or you just don't like making those decisions on when to engage and you just want to scale and just go from there, I think Janna's great. But if you enjoy being able to punish mistakes and being able to make proactive plays, then she may not be the best. But for most people, for like average players and, you know, platinum, gold, whatever, she's really good, and that is reflected in her win rate. Okay. Yuumi, talked about her before. She's still going to be incredibly powerful. The win rate, I don't care what it is. I don't care if she has a 40% win rate on paper, man. The champion, and she doesn't. She probably has like 50, I would think. Maybe somewhere between 48 and 50. Yeah, 49, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's just the risk, right? If you are able to attach to somebody that's fed, that are hyper carries, and this is really a hyper carry meta. You don't see a lot of low damage teams running around. There are some, but if you just attach to a hyper carry, just anyone on your team that knows what they're doing in the mid game, she's just almost impossible to stop. I mean, obviously she's very good with invisible champions like Yuumi, Evelynn, you know, Akshan, Twitch, or not Yuumi. Twitch is what I meant to say instead of Yuumi. But yeah, invisible champions, gonna be very strong. Highly mobile champions where your speed and just being able to run at people and ult is gonna be very strong. And people just can't interact with her, like I said before. And her laning, especially with all these other enchanters in the meta right now, her laning is pretty easy, right? Because a lot of these champs early on are not going to be able to punish you for walking up and autoing. So you can just constantly auto, get your mana back, get a shield, you know, get some airy procs, reattach, keep throwing Qs, and, you know, just kind of force your way into a stalemate lane a lot of times. And you can take double summoners with her, so you don't need flash. That's another perk. So you can take, you know, ignite, exhaust, and then your ADC can take like flash, ghost, and she just has insane scaling. Like I said, you can't interact with her. She has a really good team fighting ultimate. Her W, you give some of your stats to your AD carry, and they give some of their stats to you. Her heal still gives attack speed and movement speed, and it actually heals them. She just does a lot of degenerate things. So I think you should still ban her most of the time. I think she's a top 5. You should definitely consider banning this champ on this patch. So yeah, not a lot has changed. The thing is, I think her win rate probably with Shirelia's is very similar to Moonstone, but Moonstone is more degenerate. Yeah, Shirelia's actually has a higher win rate, but I think the ceiling on Moonstone, once you get multiple items on her, is just gross. Especially if you pair it with like a Mikhail's or an Ardent Censer. If you're going for Putrifier, then Moonstone does lose some value because that doesn't add any extra plus healing and shielding. But something like a Mikhail's or something like an Ardent Censer, as you can see, I mean, they all have like high win rates, right? It's like on paper, her win rate is 49%. But once she gets to 2 items, you know, with Ardent Censer or Mikhail's or Staff of Flowing Water, then she goes to 58%. A lot of it is people are either dying before they get their second item, which is really bad because you get a free 950 gold from not having to buy boots. But a lot of people are getting this item too, Putrifier, which I feel is a bait. Like, I've had so many times where on Rakan, I felt like I had to get Grievous Wounds, and then I look at it now off of Putrifier after the nerfs, and, you know, it's reduced to like 1,500 healing in a game. And that's just not worth the other items that you could be getting, in my opinion, most of the time. And that's reflected in the win rate here, right? Like, it's got like a 5% lower win rate than Ardent, 6% lower than Mikhail's. Like, that is a very, very significant fall off. So, unless they have like an absolutely insane amount of healing and shielding, they got a Soraka over on their team, Aatrox, Swain, Vlad, they got like all of those champions, then yes, maybe. But if it's just like they got one Lulu who's getting Moonstone or something, you should heavily consider not getting Putrifier, I think, in a lot of situations, just because it doesn't synergize with your kit very well. And you're just losing out on more powerful effects. Okay, so Yuumi's still really good. Renata has been nerfed a couple of times, but I still think she's going to be very high quality. She's just kind of the new age Lulu in a sense. I know that sounds kind of weird, but the fact that her W gives you the move speed, the attack speed, and it also acts as a revive, is just incredibly powerful. And then she's got a really long attack range early on. But it really is that W. That's just too many things on what, like, who thought of this? Like, hey, let's give a champion, like, good movement speed buffs, really good attack speed buffs, and let's just let them revive. Let's just give them, like, a zillion revive on crack, on a normal ability. Like, let's just see what happens. Like, come on, man. It's terrible design. Like, this should not have attack speed on it. The move speed makes sense. It's like, okay, you allow people to just run back at their ally. You know, to try to get that kill or get that assist to get the revive. That kind of makes sense, but it's just too strong. This really, like, this ability should be an ultimate, honestly. But she has an ultimate too, which is really good. It's a huge hitbox. Obviously, you're going to get more value out of that if they have a lot of, like, AD attack stacking champions. But even just the CC for 1.25 is still pretty good. It does have a long cooldown. And, I mean, that's kind of the theme of Renata. She has really long cooldowns on everything, but very powerful effects all around. And a pretty reasonable trading tool on her E. That's what they've nerfed quite a bit on her over time. Her E and her passive and auto attacks. But still, like, she's got a hook. It's a kind of a low range hook compared to something like Blitz, Thresh, Nautilus, whatever. It's kind of low range. It's a slender hitbox, but it's still a hook. You've got the W, which is insane. You've got the E, which is good for trading early, pretty good for team fights. And you've got your R as well. And, you know, good beneficiary of Shirelias, again, because your team can run in after you use an ult, or if your teammate gets revived and you want to pop that Shirelias to try to, you know, let them run in there so that you can bring them back to life, whatever. She's just really strong overall. I mean, her main thing is she has no mobility, and she's pretty vulnerable to getting flanked. So you got to be careful with that. But you can W yourself if they try to pick you off, and then you can get revived, or you can at least use it for movement speed to avoid a gank or whatever. So she does have some tools. She is very strong. But if you had to pick out a weakness, it's that she's slow, she's flankable, and that revive doesn't do a lot in small skirmishes sometimes. Right, so you can put the revive on somebody, but if they're getting picked off and they're going to die anyways, it's not going to save them in the same way that like a Thresh Lantern could save them, you know? But in a 5v5 team fight, it's incredibly powerful because it's highly likely you're going to be able to trade a kill back in a lot of situations, especially if your team is on the aggression, right? If they're not able to pick someone off. But anyways, Renata's still really good. I decided to bump Seraphine back up here. I think she's still good. She did get nerfed a few patches ago, but she still has good wave clear. She still has good trading. Still going to be really good in team fights. Her win rate definitely has dropped. It used to be in the 52-53 range, but still good trading, great wave clear early on. You know, pretty good CC selection with her E and her R, both AoE, both have pretty good duration. You know, your W is on a long cooldown, but it does provide a nice shield, provides a little bit of healing. You can get Moonstone, but on her, I feel like it's kind of a bait. Shirelias seems to be a lot better. You can use your W plus Shirelias to just boost the team in after you ult or something like that. So she's still just going to be pretty good. The main reason that I have her in here over Sona is just her range. She just has a lot more range on her ultimate, and she has multiple pieces of CC with her E. E plus R, that is. So, and she just has way better wave clear, which is really good when you combine it with something like a Sivir. You know, you can just cue the wave, and then Sivir throws her boomerang and W in it, and it just disappears. So, I think that wave clear is definitely underrated in a lot of situations. And you might be caught just trying to clear at a tower, right, while your ADC backs, or people died, and you know, you're just trying to hold a position, then the wave clear can be pretty good. So that's why I have her a little bit over Sona, even though a lot of people think they're very similar. The meme is like, that's Sona 2.0. It's really not if you play her. Again, the big differentiation is the range is much higher on Seraphine, multiple pieces of CC, and wave clear, which Sona doesn't have. Now, Sona does give out more buffs to her team, and she has much lower cooldowns. So Sona's probably going to put out a lot more personal damage, like team damage, if everyone's clumped up. If you're just like spamming Qs, you know, and power cores and things like that, she's probably going to do more damage. She's going to contribute more to a team fight if it's a longer fight. But Seraphine, even though she has those longer cooldowns, you have more impactful individual cooldowns with her, I think. So that's why she gets the nod for me to be a little bit higher. And then, of course, Rakan. Y'all know I'm going to put Rakan up there. It's probably my most controversial one, right? A lot of tier lists are not going to have him up there. But he still is the total package. He's got Engage. Pretty reasonable sustain for the laning phase compared to some of the other, especially compared to the other Engage champions on the list. The hard Engage, like the Nautilus, the Leona. He's going to do a lot better against some of these poke lanes that are out there, just because you have that regenerating shield. You've got your Q, which was buffed a few patches ago to give you a bit more healing. And he's just really versatile. You can peel really well if they engage into you. I think he's one of the best engaged champions in the game. You can escape ganks really well, as he has like a million different dashes. It just always feels like when I play Rakan versus I play somebody else, it always feels like the answer is there. You just have to find it. Like, you have the toolkit. If you need an engage, if you need to peel, if you need some combination of the two, you can do it. You just have to make the right decision. You have to be patient, and you have to have the right timings. And that's the biggest thing about Rakan, because you just have so many options with how you can negotiate or navigate fights, right? It's like, when are you going to use your E's? When are you going to use your W? How many people are you going to try to hit with your R? All of these are very rarely obvious answers, unless you're just picking someone off. Obviously, that's the easiest one. You just go in and kill them and then get back out, right? But a lot of times you're going to go in with your W, and then there's going to be more allies standing there, and you got to, ask yourself, okay, do I try to tag one more person and risk getting hit by that Lux Bind or that Nautilus hook or whatever, or do I just go for one person and then just run back out immediately? Right? Do I stay on the back line and try to disrupt their ADC as much as I can, or do I hang back and try to peel their diver from our ADC? So there's just so many different options you can do with Rakan. I think he's the second highest skill cap support in the game, maybe just a hair behind Thresh. But incredibly powerful champion if you can make the right decisions. But he does require a lot of practice to play well. So in some sense, he's safe in that, he can get away from a lot of stuff, but in other senses he's very dangerous because you have to go into melee to do anything, basically, whether it's shielding an ally or attacking an enemy. And when you're in melee, that means you can get hit by CC, collateral damage, all of that stuff, and he's really vulnerable to that. So the real skill is, again, and it's something that I'm always trying to work on, is the patience and just like having the foresight and the visibility to be able to see what all is going to happen in this fight and to be able to dodge the important stuff, not get hit by the Lux Bind, the Morg Bind, the, Amumu Bandage, Amumu Ultimate, whatever it is, you need to not get hit by it. So you either have to wait, you have to anticipate it and flash it, or you have to dodge it, one way or another. And, like, strafing, like multiple pieces of CC while your Shirellia is running in is harder than it seems a lot of times. Right, a lot of times, and with his W too, there are a lot of ways people can interact with that in ways they can't with hooks. Right, so if you try to W in, people can stop you before you knock them up, and it's extremely frustrating. Right, you're trying to go in on an ADC or something like that, an enemy can hook you mid-flight, they can bind you mid-flight, they can flay you or whatever. There are a lot of different ways they can interact with you. And the enemy, like, depending on when you do it, they're going to have time to flash it or dash it as well in ways they may not be able to do with other champions. So a lot of times you'll find yourself running in with your W or with your R, trying to get them to use their mobility, get them to flash or get them to dash first. And so it's this kind of cat and mouse game. Or if you're running at someone like a, Lux, you might be waiting on her to throw that bind so you can flash it, or you might be trying to run to the side of her hoping that, you can dodge her Q. So, again, there's a lot of kind of cat and mouse with him, and it requires a lot of anticipation and just sort of knowing what the enemy is going to do, what they're capable of, and just dodging it, because he's so squishy. If you get CC'd, you're probably going to die. If you're Leona and you go in, you hit your R, and you go in with your E, and you stun them with your Q, a lot of times your job's done, Like, if they use a bunch of CC on you, great. They're probably not going to kill you, or they're going to use a lot of resources on you, right? But Rakan, not great, because it can stop you from CCing them, and they can kill you really quickly a lot of times. So, anyways, I have been messing around with different options. I had been trying AP with quite a lot of success for a while there, but I still do like the Shirelias now that I've come back to it. It's just cheaper, and it's hard to put a price on that movement speed. It's so valuable. Yes, your team doesn't always make the most out of it with the active, but even just the passive, like being able to speed your team up and get into situations, is just really handy. And it's such a low cooldown. The fact that you can activate it twice with your E is just really nice. So if you do have something like a Tristana or a Kill Lane or something like that, then yes, Night Harvester build, or I had actually been trying out the Everfrost build. Both of those can be strong. The build path is better. It does allow you to snowball and get more kills in lanes. All of that is still true that I had before. Shirelias is just kind of the more well-rounded item, especially if you have bruisers on your team that are really going to use that effect well. Hecarim's, Olaf's. I mean, there's just so many champions that really like that movement speed. Particularly if you combine it with something like a Sivir, where everybody's running in, or Zyra with her movement speed. It's just really, really nice with a lot of the other champions in the meta. So there are still a lot of different builds, but I'm kind of leaning back towards the Shirelias, even though I did have success with the AP build as well. And then secondary items. Now look at this too. This was kind of like, what do we look at? Yuumi. When you get to 2 items on Rakan, that win rate goes up, right? You're in the 60s now once you get to 2 items. And there are a lot of different options. He probably has more options at the second item than almost anyone in the game, because you can go for team fight utility items, you can go for AP personal utility items, you can go for kind of tanky items if you want to. The ones that I tend to gravitate towards the most, especially if I'm doing Shirelias, will be either Zeke's, because that adds extra on-hit damage, particularly if you're, you have a hyperscaling ADC that has a lot of attack speed. That's really nice. Or Knight's Vow can help protect from assassins. So if you're really trying to protect somebody, especially like a bruiser, you really want to protect that Aatrox, he's the carry on your team right now, go ahead and grab that Knight's Vow. Especially if they have defense on their team and if they have lifesteal, it's really good, because it's basically like true protection, right? It redirects 10% after mitigation, no questions asked, over to you, and if they get low, it goes to 20%. So you're going to get a lot more value out of that, just like healing and shielding. You're going to get more value out of that the more armor that they have, or the longer they can stay alive through lifesteal and things like that. And just sometimes saving that extra 10% is enough, especially if they have something like a Death's Dance. Maybe they get that kill at like 5% HP, and then they all of a sudden erase all that Death's Dance damage. They get the Triumph procs, they get their resets or whatever. Like, just keeping somebody alive just a little bit longer is a very, very big deal in a meta where there are so many resets and so much healing, and Death's Dance and Triumph are still like not significantly nerfed for some reason. So, incredibly strong item. This item is the lowest win rate. Again, the Putrefier, I would not recommend it unless they have like an absurd amount of healing, like a Moonstone Enchanter that heals for a lot, a Sona, maybe a Yuumi, Soraka, you got to get it. So there are a few cases, but you might be best served by the other items. Now, Zhonya's is also like pretty reasonable, especially if they have a lot of AD, especially if you're going for the Glacial Augment build, which I really like the Guardian build more, but I know a lot of people also go for Glacial. Guardian just makes you personally a lot more difficult to kill. But Glacial can help your team out, and if you're getting stopwatch and Glacial, that's going to make your Zhonya's only cost $23.50. You get a 250 gold bonus on it. So it's a really nice pickup if you want to do that. So it helps you out personally. It allows you to make more aggressive engages. It allows you to dive towers better because you can, Zhonya's and drop aggro. So that's a pretty good item. I've also looked at Banshees, which I really did enjoy. It's a very cost-efficient item. It's like 120%. And that can be really good if they have a lot of those, super annoying CC champions, especially if they don't have a lot of poke. But they've got like Veigar, they've got a Talia, they've got Poppy, just anything that has really obnoxious like anti-CC, then Banshees is going to be handy. So especially if it's a lot of AP damage. So just think about it. It's on the table. It's 2,600 gold. I think it used to be 2,500, so they did nerf it a little bit. But those are usually the most prevalent options. Abyssal Mask is good, obviously. If they have a lot of AP and you have a lot of AP, that can help buff your team up. Ardent Sensor, I've been getting this more often. If you do have a lot of auto attackers on your team, that's good. Now be aware you're going to be a lot squishier if you go Ardent versus something like Zeke's. The nice thing about Zeke's is it has that armor and the HP on it, so that is handy. And it's only going to buff one person's on hit damage, but it lasts for a long time. It's 8 seconds, and it's a lot of damage. It's more than Ardent Sensor. Now, it doesn't give the attack speed, but the damage itself is much higher. So if you just have one person who's really fed that attacks fast, like your AD carry, then Zeke's might be a better choice. It also has ability haste on it, which is something Ardent Sensor doesn't have. So, if you have 3 auto attackers on your team that are going to benefit from Ardent, you could still consider it, but I think a lot of times Zeke's is probably going to be a safer bet. Okay, and then the last little bit here is I don't want this to take too terribly long. Taric, I still don't understand why this guy has like a 54% win rate, but it's there, so I'm going to respect it. I can't quite put him in S, but I'll put him in A. And, I mean, it's hard to deny. He really is, getting it done win rate-wise. He's a little bit over Janna. He still has a low play rate and a low pick rate, or a low ban rate, so it's kind of hard to tell. But, I mean, 3% is still a significant number. Like, people are definitely playing him. I feel like he is good in engaged champs. People have been running Shirelias on him more to help you sort of get in there and start the fight. But the problem is, kind of like with Janna, he doesn't really have a great way to start a fight. Like, he can help other people start a fight, maybe a little bit more than Janna can with his stun. But nevertheless, that's not his strong suit. But if they're diving into you, or even better, if you have a way to get onto them, if your team has engaged, you can force a fight and stay on them while you ult and give your team the invulnerability. He's very good. The problem is if they're able to disengage. So when you ult, they're able to run away and wait out that ult. That's a problem. But he does have nice sustain in lane with his Q, especially if you get a tier on him. And if they have a lot of melees, as long as you can just keep meleeing and just keep using your heal and your stuns and just all of your stuff in team fights, he can be very strong. So if they have a lot of melee, he's great. But if you can't really stick to them, right, if they have a lot of range or a lot of mobility, and especially if they're like playing side lanes, if they're skirmishing or trying to assassinate people, if they're just not opting into 5v5s, or if your team's just running around YOLO queuing, he can be a little bit weaker. But, I mean, 54% is 54%, so I'm going to put him really high. I could see some people putting him in S. Again, I just don't see it all the time. Also, I feel like he gets outscaled by enchanters, although with that kind of win rate on paper, he's probably going to look like he does pretty well. But I just don't see how he answers something like, Yuumi Sivir or, Lulu Twitch or, something like that that's just like hyper scaling. Because he doesn't have any modifiers. He doesn't have anything in his kit that gives attack speed or gives extra AD. His heals are nice over time, but they're kind of wimpy in the sense they're not, like, bursty. So, and he's melee. Like, again, you have to stay in melee to do stuff, and you can get kited. Or punished for running in there. You're going to get hit by all the collateral damage. Now, he is tanky, but he's alright. Okay, Lulu, I could definitely see some arguments for putting Lulu in S. If it's pro play, she's definitely an S. She can be poked out early. She doesn't have any sustain. She has low range for an enchanter. She's like 650 range, so that's the range on her shield at least. And her polymorph, I think, are both 650 versus Janna's shield is 800. So she has a little bit, she does have to get in there. But she's, she buffs up allies a ton, right? Because not only does she give a similar attack speed and movement speed as Lulu, but it's really that Pix damage that people underestimate, right? In the mid game, level 9, level 10, something like that, Pix is going to be hitting for like 80 extra damage on attack when you put that on your ADC. That's a lot. Like, on-hit damage is usually valued at 25 gold a pop, so if you're doing 80 damage, that's like 2,000 gold worth of value that you're giving to your ADC. Now, it's not the same as on hit. It doesn't interact with Hurricane. It doesn't interact with Gensu's. It's on attack, technically. But for most builds, it's effectively going to be on hit. It's a lot of extra damage. So, that makes her really strong. And then, obviously, Polymorph against so many of these melee champions that try to run in and dive. That's just an incredibly powerful piece of CC. Right? It's point-click. 2.25 second CC, or these squishy ADCs that rely on mobility, right? So if you can manage to polymorph a Zyra or polymorph a Vayne is very low range. You could polymorph her. Zyra is higher range, but I've seen people flash poly before. And then you also have your ultimate, which can just instantly, boost someone up, give that knock up, give them the extra health. So that's really good at protecting your team, but it's also pretty good for divers. That does have a longer range. I think it's like maybe 1,000 range, 900 range, something like that. Might even be a little bit more. But if your Diana jumps into the enemy team, pulls them all in, and then you ult, like that's a very good wombo combo. obviously. So she does cater to engage and dive champs a little bit more than someone like Janna. Now her scaling's not going to be as high because her ult doesn't scale with plus healing and shielding. It doesn't scale particularly well with AP. The shield, like I said, is closer range. So she's a little bit less on the defense and the scaling in that respect, but more on the offense, right? In that you get scaling with picks. Picks basically scales with their attack speed, and it scales a little bit with your AP. So she's still going to be an all-around powerhouse champion, especially if you have, again, one of those high-speed attacking ADCs that benefits a lot from something like Pix and Whimsy. So Kog'Maw particularly is really crazy with her. Twitch is very good with her. Sivir's good with her. I think Ziri's probably pretty good with her. So most hyper-scaling champs are going to be good. Okay, and then the last few, Sona, not a lot has changed there. She does still have very consistent poke. They can't dodge it in the lanes. That's really like the great part about her early is you just spam Q. You're going to hit them with Airy. If you choose to go Scorch, you can hit them with Scorch procs. You're going to be stacking up your power cord. Your W is kind of wimpy. They have nerfed the heal on that, so you can sustain some early, but it's kind of rough. Getting a tier on her is very nice, but that is an extra cost. Most of these other champions, their mana regen is fine early on. Sona is really one of the only modern champs that needs that tier that's a support early on, other than Taric. But she does scale well. If you can protect her late game, she's good. Now, like I said, she does have the ultimate, which is similar to Seraphine's, but Seraphine's is a much longer hitbox, so she can play way further back. She doesn't have the wave clear, and she doesn't have any other CC. Right, like you've got your W to reduce damage, and that's nice if you green power cord somebody, but that's not the same as, rooting them or stunning them or whatever for 1.25 seconds, so, which is what Seraphine does. So I think she's just kind of a worse version of Seraphine right now. But man, if she goes unchecked in team fights and you're able to get some, Moonstone plus Ardent Sensor or just some other team fighting item, and you just go unchecked later and just spam your abilities, if the fight lasts longer than 5 seconds, you probably win. Like, you're just giving too many stats, too much healing, too much shielding to your team in 5v5s. So, she's still incredibly powerful if you can protect her. And speaking of which, we have Soraka. So, I'm going to put Soraka just a little bit higher, just because Soraka is more extreme. They're very similar in what they're trying to do. Sona has the guaranteed hits on her Q in lane. Soraka has to actually hit skill shots with her Q, but Soraka has much better sustain even if you don't hit your Q in the laning phase. The healing is just like off the charts early on. It's going to force people to get Grievous. Grievous is a lot weaker than it used to be. And she's just going to provide just overwhelming healing in a lot of situations. So and a lot of people are going to buy multiple Grievous, right? They're not going to listen. Even if you ping, I'm going to get Putrefier. Your ADC's still going to get Executioners. Not salty. Maybe a little. Maybe just a pinch of salt. But it just really just messes with the enemy team. And people just get so tilted off of her as well, just being able to heal through. You can't interact with her in lane unless you have a hard engage team and your ADC actually has hands and is trying to be aggressive, which is less likely the lower your elo goes. So if you just sit there and try to farm with her, and you've got like an Ezreal Janna team on the other side, like she's just going to scale so incredibly hard if you don't check her in the laning phase. Now she does have a little bit more wave clear than Sona. That Q, if you get like 3 points of Q for the laning phase, it can do pretty good harassment and it can do okay damage on the back line and help like a Sivir push or something like that. And her mana costs are really low. So she is very good. Now again, Grievous, still good against her, but not quite as devastating as it used to be. So if she can get the proper protection, especially if your team has a bunch of tanks, stuff with that stance, all that kind of, all those kinds of items, then she's going to be good. Now, sort of similar to Janna, she has very limited options in terms of offense. You can't really speed your team in. You can get a Shirelius to help out with that some, instead of Moonstone, which may not be that bad of an idea, just because that diversifies your threat a little bit more. Because they're going to get Grievous against you, like 100%. Yeah, it's got like about a 1.5% higher win rate. But, I mean, you don't have all the crazy healing. Obviously, getting the 20% plus healing and shielding would be really nice, you know, with Soraka's kit. So Moonstone's still going to be incredibly powerful. But if you do want to diversify, I think Shirelia's is pretty reasonable as well. That's going to give you more movement speed. If you hit your Q, you know, and then pop a Shirelia's, you can go really fast. So it just kind of depends on the nature of their threats. If they have stuff that's running at you, or they just have a bunch of blinks and gap closers, and the movement speed may not matter that much. Okay. Nautilus, still going to be a pretty strong champion. They are buffing up the... I forgot the name of that item. I always want to call it Eclipse, but that's not what it is. The Even Shroud. That is an option that could be good on him. Glacial's pretty good. Obviously, he's going to have really strong engage. He just doesn't scale super well. He's particularly bad against Sivir. So you definitely want to ban Sivir if you play him, because she can Dispel Shield his ult, which is one of the main reasons you pick him. So Sivir, quite good against him. But most other ADCs against things like Zyra, he's going to be pretty good to kind of shut down their mobility. But his damage is kind of low compared to some of the other all-in champs early on. Like Leona's going to do more damage. Obviously, something like Blitzcrank, Zyra, or Brand are going to do more damage. Lux is going to do more damage. But if you do land those hooks, it is a fat hitbox. If you can pressure them off the wave, that's nice. You do have that guaranteed engage from your R, except against Sivir or Bubble champions. Morgana also quite good against him. And I get people picking Morgana into me a lot as Rakan. And Rakan's like okay into Morgana, but like that can be, I imagine that's probably pretty rough for Nautilus, because again, that's gonna stop most of his stuff. So anyways, he can be good. He does have a lot of interactions that are nice. Like you can peel with your Q as well. You can stop people from flying through the air with it because it is a displacement. So, you know, you can knock a Zac that's trying to fly in on your team. You can stop a Leona from engaging with the hook. Like, you've got a lot of high IQ plays you can do with him. But he still gets outscaled pretty hard if you let the enchanters get to 2 or 3 items. And you'll notice that trend. It's like the top, 9 champions that I have are all enchanter-esque type of champions. And then Zyra, again, like I said in the patch notes, she gets a little bit better here with the E. I'll put her up here as sort of an honorary mention. She does have a ton of damage early on that might actually allow you to land more of your Rs and get that knockup before they're able to jump away. So that'll obviously be really strong if that's how that interaction works. She still requires kills. They did buff up double mask builds, so that will help her out a little bit if you want to go Leandri's Demonic. Then if you have someone somewhere else on the map who's also getting Demonic, a Swain, Mordekaiser, Diana, whatever, you don't have to feel as bad about it because they can stack now. But she's still squishy. It's still fairly easy to flank her and engage on her. She just has her E to protect herself pretty much. Like your R sort of kind of, but not really. But she is very lane dominant, right? If you can push in with a Sivir or Jhin or really anything, you should win lane. If they don't camp you with the jungler, you should be winning almost every lane most of the time. So it's just a question of how much, right? If you're only getting like a 10 CS lead in the laning phase, and then that Yuumi gets out of the lane and gets the 2 or 3 items in a team fight, and you only have a couple of kills, and your ADC's up 10, 15 CS, that's not going to be enough. Like, you really got to hard dominate. Now, she does have a long attack range, too, at 575, so that does allow you to, you know, put extra pressure on towers, but you got to make something happen. Okay. Last couple, and then we got to call it. Blitz, obviously really good if you can consistently hit the enchanters. You know, he can blow them up. The durability patch is a bit rougher on him, but he's still going to be good if you hit the hooks. Ashe has been kind of a flavor of the month type of pick. The arrow is very good later, but that's also very hard countered by Mikhail's. And all of those champions, not all of them, but the vast majority of those top-end champions have the option of buying a Mikhail's in their build. Even Rakan can get a Mikhail's second if he wants to. And that's going to be quite good. Or there are champions that can peel Ashe arrows as well. So she does provide some nice poke, but and the arrow is very good, but it's very gimmicky, and that's kind of all she does later on in the game. And that's pretty much going to be it. I do want to finish this up in under an hour. Amumu has been showing up more in pro. He is good if you can be aggressive, if you can get those kills early. He can be nice, but like a lot of other engaged champions, he's going to fall off if you don't do something with that lead. Anyways, that's going to be it. Thank y'all very much. Hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to like and subscribe. Let me know what you think in the chat. Which champions do you think are strong? Which are your favorites right now? Have you seen any cool new builds? Come by, check out the stream, 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every night. And I'll see you next time. Have a good day.